Welcome to the Hustle Pod. It's Brian Power along with Drew Martin here to get you over the hump on Wednesday here this of the work week. And Drew, as always, we've got a ton on tap. Looking back at that incredible finish of Ohio State Notre Dame, which was important to some, quite frankly, many. Sharp and square divide on Denver and Miami. Well, how about that Denver being the alleged sharp side there? Not so fast. And I know I've got a college football game that I want everyone to hear about. But Drew, how you doing, buddy?
BP, I'm doing good, man. Always good to be on with you here, making the hump day a little bit sweeter, we could say, especially after a pretty good weekend. College football. I'm kind of, how do I put it? Probably hovering around 500, but NFL, man, it's been good. So like when the sun, it always feels like getting the week off, and when Sunday's good, it kind of puts you in a good place. But I'd really like to get college football going a little bit better, and I think I will this week. Coming into week 5, you tend to get a little bit more knowledge of some of these teams. So I'm feeling good about CFB. And you bring up Notre Dame, Ohio State. First off, got to give credit. I mean, those Notre Dame uniforms, man. I don't know if you like them, but the gold helmets, bright green. I was a big fan. I mean, and in that stadium, the grass, I just thought it looked really good. But overall, great game, back and forth. If you like defense, it was right up your alley. And then right there at the end, talking about the ending, only having the 10 guys, it's kind of a bad look, for a head coach, a young head coach. But I'll tell you this, BP, it's something coming off the sideline like that. It can be difficult for coaches to know who's in and who's not, rather than subbing one guy off from the field for another guy. Just wanted to bring that up, that it was something that I think happens more than people realize when you're coming off the sideline.
Sure. Well, and first of all, Notre Dame could have been wearing orange and purple Saturday night. I would have been rooting for them because I had a 5% play plus 3.5. Luckily, I was able to escape no matter what on that final play. I know, unfortunately, a lot of people had to settle for the push. And yeah, it's there was a lot of chaos. Didn't Freeman have his headset off too? He used that as an excuse why it may have happened on the last play at least. But look, man, I mean, it can't happen. It can't. I mean, in that situation, I mean, it can cost you a national championship. It was, an unfortunate finish, I know, for Notre Dame fans.
Hey, BP.
They got. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, sorry to cut you off, man. Go ahead. I thought you were going to change the subject.
All I was going to do is say I was happy I had the hook. Okay. Like, I mean, everyone's good. It was so dramatic. And the entire time, I'm just like, well, thank goodness I have the hook. For the benefit of all my clients who bet it, I wanted it to be that they didn't make Ohio State kick the extra point, because then everyone would have won it +3. And then I had to sweat out a kick. There is no play in sports I hate more than a last second kickoff in college football, because they're going to start pitching the ball like crazy. And if Ohio State would have picked that up and run it in, I don't know what I would have done, Drew, but it wouldn't have been something I could probably repeat on this program. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was so weird. Watch just as a +3.5 backer. I guess it didn't affect my bottom line, but if you're a Notre Dame fan, you've got to be furious with how that game ended up. Or if you had +3.
It's a reminder. It's a reminder to get good numbers, which yes, you did. So hats off to you. Another thing out there, BP, I heard some people talking about Notre Dame's already out of the playoffs. And I'm always one to kind of like pump the brakes on that. Like if a team, particularly one that has as much fanfare as Notre Dame, loses a game early, I just because so much can happen in college football. It was a hit to their bottom line for sure, but I wouldn't say they're out of it. Like if they run the table, there's a lot of scenarios where they can get into the playoff.
Oh, absolutely. If they run the table and their only loss is by 3 to what's going to be a very good Ohio State team, obviously, early in the year on a coin flip game, they of course have a chance to get in. One of the big discussions is obviously we're moving to the 12-team playoff next year. And, you can already see the need for, I don't know what your opinion is on expanding the playoff, but you can, in my view, you can see kind of the need for it because there are not dominant teams this year in college football. Georgia is number one just based on what they've done the last 2 years. The idea that there's 2 or 3 teams right now that, oh, you can just pencil them into the top 4 is ludicrous, in my opinion. There's like, I'd say 12 teams right now that all have a legit shot. Notre Dame is probably at the bottom of that list right now because they lost. But no, I don't think you could close the door on them because they lost a game in September by 3 points to an Ohio State team that will probably not lose more than 1 or 2 games all year.
Yeah, in your point on Georgia, like I'm with you. You know, I wrote up a free play in the Kentucky Florida game. Guys, go check it out. The free picks on Wager Talk, and I'm thinking to myself, like in the future, do Kentucky or Florida have like a puncher's chance to knock off Georgia? You know what? Call me crazy. I actually think they do this year, particularly if Georgia doesn't get going offensively like they have in the last couple years. But hey, we'll see what happens. I mean, they're both teams are going to be catching points and go off as the underdog. But I thought that's a good point. You know, there is not as many like heavily favored teams this year. We've seen Alabama struggle. Like, is Texas that good? Sure, but I mean, are they really going to dominate all their way to the national championship like we've kind of seen in years past? No way. So look, this year I think a 12-team playoff would have been great. My overall thoughts on it, BP, I do worry about like, I guess, rivalry games in the final week of the season taking a hit. You know, Auburn, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. Like, could we actually see teams rest players just because they know they're already in? If that happens, that would change my thoughts because that would be a terrible thing for college football. But other than that, no, I think it's going to be great, man. But I will add one more caveat. That first round and the second round, I would say need to be at the home stadium of the higher ranked team because I worry like the ACC championship game in Charlotte, dude, you sometimes look at that stadium, it's half full. That is not what college football should be. And I worry that they're kind of heading in that direction. That's why I think it needs to be at the home stadium in the earlier rounds of the higher ranked team.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it is. Unfortunately, I don't have that. It's one of those things that somebody in my ear is saying, so unless if they're doing something else, maybe that is accurate. But, I just want to say this, about Georgia, going back to your earlier point. This week is a very interesting litmus test for the Bulldogs. If they don't like clobber an Auburn team that can't throw for more than 75 yards against a team with a pulse, then I think there is something wrong with Georgia. They're laying 14.5 on the road between the hedges here. I know a game that you're very interested in, Drew, but Auburn's passing attack is what's the words I'm looking for? Not good. So
not good at all.
Tough. If you can't throw the ball, it's tough to play against Georgia. So, Notre Dame, I broke their game with Duke down on Wager Talk today. It is a miserable spot laying points against an unbeaten Duke team this week, after a crushing loss. Does Duke have a chance to stay unbeaten? Could Duke spring the upset here? We talked about it. Notre Dame still viable for the playoffs if they run the table. If they lose here to Duke, they probably are out of it. What do you think about this one, Drew, real quick?
I love this game. I mean, a high IQ game, two great universities. And I'll tell you this, BP, yes, Duke has a chance. If you've watched Duke, which I have multiple games this season, their quarterback is really good. I mean, if you want a long shot to win the Heisman, this kid Leonard, he's pretty good. He can spin the football. He's athletic. He's a former basketball player. I like their quarterback, and I obviously like Notre Dame's quarterback. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football as well. I would have actually thought about being on Duke if Notre Dame would have found a way to win that game against Ohio State. I think there would have been a little bit more point spread value, if you will. But overall, I have both of these two teams circled as bet on, and I have bet on them to this point in the season in different weeks, BP. I'll tell you this, when that happens, I usually stay off the game just because I like both teams. So that's where I stand. I'm looking to bet on both Duke and Notre Dame in the near future. What are you thinking in Durham? I mean, this is probably the biggest game I can remember of our lifetimes for Duke. So this is going to be a fun one to watch. What are you liking?
Yeah, I think it's their first time as a ranked team hosting a fellow ranked team since the early 90s. I don't know if Spurrier was still there or not, but look, Mike Elko, the coach of Duke, and his staff is familiar with Sam Hartman, remember? Because Hartman came over from where? Wake Forest. Duke beat Wake Forest last year with Hartman as quarterback. Now, they gave up a lot of points. They gave up a lot of yards. I believe it was a 34-31 final. But you talk about this Duke team for a second. Last 10 games, they're 9-1 straight up, 8-2 against the number. Their only straight up loss, Drew, was by 2 points. So, going back, I think Duke is for real. We'll find out how for real they are because Notre Dame obviously is the better team, favored on the road. So we shall see. I agree. I would have liked Duke even more had Notre Dame won the game last week. But, it's tough to get off the mat when you lose like a game like that on the final play, or basically the final play. So there's something I wanted to ask you that you talked about with Kelly, and it is the sharp square divide in the NFL. You were talking Miami and Denver and noted that many were calling Denver the sharp side last week. Spoiler alert, Denver was not the sharp side last week. Would you like to further expound on that here? Because I found it a little fascinating what you had to say with Kelly.
Sure, BP. I mean, it started last year. I would notice people like sports betting content, it's becoming way more mainstream. And people would just like go down the list and be like, oh, the percent of tickets are on this side and the percent are on another side. And this is the sharp side. And people were just going out and saying that. And BP, from being a sports bettor for almost as my straight job for almost a decade now, and also being in the content industry, I started to think to myself, you know what? That is a very lazy way to handicap. And people that aren't really doing this seriously as bettors, it's very easy to just go down the list and do that. And then I notice more and more people doing that in sports betting content, being like, oh, this is the sharp side. Oh, this is the square side, a pro versus a Joe. And I just started to think to myself, stop listening to that. That makes no sense a majority of the time, guys. And I just wanted to kind of get that out there. And Kelly in Vegas, she's a person that also bets and does content. And she saw it right away. Like she, agrees with it. I've talked to more people about that. Like, yeah, I stopped listening to that stuff like a long time ago. And that's the only thing I wanted to throw out there. I just think it's overused, and it's getting like saturated where it doesn't mean as much. So therefore, when I hear like, oh, this is the sharp side now, like we did with the Denver Broncos last week, they're 0-2 in catching 6.5, and then they go give up 70 points. It's just another, kind of cherry on top saying like, guys, don't always listen to that, man. Go with the matchup, who's going to win in the trenches, what this team does against this team, and that matchup, who does it help? When you handicap that way, I bet you'll win more long term. And that's what I wanted to throw out there, BP. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is what I'm going to say, okay? If you do your own handicapping and you really like a side, you should not allow yourself to be talked out of it by social media or these bet percentages or what people say, like, oh, that's not the sharp side. If you really like it, you're going to kick yourself if it wins and you don't bet it because you were listening to social media. The reverse is you should just blindly bet something because people say it's the quote unquote sharp side if you don't like it. So that would be my take on that. I mean, there is such a thing as quote unquote a sharp side. There is such a thing as quote unquote a public side. I think Colorado money line last week certainly would be an example of something that was a public side. I don't think it was a particularly sharp. It wasn't a sharp side, I'll tell you that. And I'm not just saying that because of the result. I mean, anytime you're looking, taking a 21-point dog, to win outright, I don't know how sharp that is. But it exists. But to your point, there's been a lot of talk about that, again, in this space. These bet percentages you see all over Twitter or X or whatever we want to call it. Like just how valuable really is that? I don't know. But there is certainly something to what you said. I don't think you should blindly tail what you are, and this goes for everybody listening, what you're hearing is the quote-unquote sharp side. What you're hearing is quote-unquote, the square side. That's
well
where
said.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
I like it, BP. And I was just saying, we're running up against it time-wise, I know, and I know you wanted to talk about USA and James Madison, man. I don't know if you want to get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. What a game to close things out with here. The college football card this week, not as juicy as it was last week when we had all those top 25 matchups. But this is a line move I talked about earlier this week on the Power 5, Drew. It's a game I broke down some on the college football show yesterday. South Alabama, they opened +4.5, but down to +3 on the road against James Madison, who's unbeaten this year, 4-0, and they've won 7 in a row going back to last season. But let's put the stop sign up on James Madison here. All 3 of their wins against FBS teams this year by 7 points or less. 2 of them by 3 points total. One of those was by 1 against lowly Virginia, a Virginia team that I think everyone would put near the bottom of their rankings among Power 5 schools. Tip your cap to what James Madison has done since becoming an FBS program. But South Alabama, guys, let's not forget, 10-3 last year. They returned 18 starters. They played a poor opener against Tulane, a good Tulane team. And then last week, a head-scratching defeat on the road to Central Michigan. I'm going to buy South Alabama as a dog here, Drew. Bill Conley, he does the post-game win expectancies. Again, that's one of these things that some people put stock in, maybe some don't. I like to look at it and read between the box scores, read between the lines, make my own conclusions. South Alabama was up 14-0 against Central Michigan. They give up the game-winning touchdown in the final minute. Bill Conley said they had an 85% post-game win expectancy. Bottom line, no matter how many you want to quantify it, South Alabama, it's a game they should have won last week. I'm going dog here. James Madison's just played 3 in a row on the road. You got to wonder what they have left in the tank. They blew all of a 24-point lead last week against Utah State, who's not very good, needed a touchdown with 6 minutes left. I am just a bigger believer in South Alabama, and that is why I will be taking the 3 points in this Sun Belt matchup, Drew.
USA up against the Dukes. Great game, man, overall. And I guess JMU's defense is really good, but good point there going up against Virginia. And I'm with you. South Alabama, great recruiting grounds. They've kind of been underrated for a little while now. So I'm not going up against you, my friend.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening, if you're watching, let me know what you think of that South Alabama pick down in the comments section. Let us know what you think of the sharp square divide. Let us know what you think of Notre Dame Duke. Let us know what you think of anything, quite frankly, by commenting here on YouTube. And of course, please be subscribed to the Wager Talk YouTube page. Ton of great sports betting content each and every day. Drew and I are all over this channel. That should be reason enough to be subscribed. And Drew, unless if you have any closing thoughts, I will just point out, shamelessly, I am the $2 handicapper this week at Wager Talk. Have my first 5% NFL play up right now for just $2. It doesn't get much better than that. That's all I've got, Drew. You could take us home with anything you would like to tell the viewers.
No, BP. I go cash that $2 Tuesday pick, my man. And guys, thanks for chiming in. Chime in the comments below. Any questions, feel free, and cash those tickets this weekend.